A sitting member of Congress may have just aided illegal immigrants in avoiding federal law enforcement, and yet the mainstream media? Silent. Not a peep. Lucky for you, we're not the mainstream. We don't read from corporate scripts. We don't follow DNC talking points. We run on truth, grit, and the unwavering belief that nobody, not even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is above the law. And it all started with a memo. Not some bombshell headline. Not a viral scandal. Just a simple, quietly delivered, red-sealed document that made its way into IC headquarters on an otherwise dull and overcast morning in Washington, D.C. Tom Homan, former IC director, a seasoned lawman and one hell of a bloodhound when it comes to sniffing out political hypocrisy, read that memo, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And what he uncovered? Not just alarming, infuriating. Time and time again, ICE operations were failing. High-priority targets were slipping away. Communities were resisting, not by accident, not by instinct, but with coordinated, rehearsed responses. Somehow, they knew what was coming. They were prepared.
How?
Public live streams. Town halls. Led by none other than Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Let that sink in. While federal agents were mobilizing to apprehend known threats, someone in Congress was handing out the playbook on how to stop them. Tom didn't lose his temper. Didn't slam his fist on the desk. That's not his way. He simply leaned back in his chair, took a deep breath, and muttered, "If she thinks she can play hero by undermining federal law, then she's damn well going to face the consequences." By noon, he had already put together a formal request for a Senate special inquiry. By 2 p.m., the document was signed, sealed, and delivered. AOC had crossed the line. Now, the hunt for the truth had officially begun. Have you ever seen an entire neighborhood rehearse a constitutional flash mob? Well, Tom Homan just did. And let's be clear, it wasn't a flash. It was a script. By the time he sent that request to the Senate, something inside him had shifted. Not rage. Not vengeance. Something colder. More calculated. Because Homan knew Washington. He knew how the left played the game. And he knew one undeniable truth. A cleverly worded soundbite could do far more damage than 1,000 protest signs. But it wasn't until he opened the Chicago file that the pieces truly clicked into place. Chicago, the 3rd largest city in America. And apparently, its most legally literate immigrant community. According to the IC report, Operation Hollow Sky had been set in motion, targeting 3 individuals with violent criminal ties. The plan? Precise. The intel? Rock solid. But within 15 minutes, the entire operation had collapsed.
Why?
ICE agents approached the target's locations with full, legal administrative warrants, only to find front doors covered in laminated flyers. Know your rights, they read. Bold font. English and Spanish. Stapled at eye level, forming a homemade, legal barricade. Behind those doors? Nothing. No shouts. No footsteps. Just the faint sound of window blinds being slowly drawn aside. One field agent radioed in. "Sir, nobody's answering. They're quoting case law through the mail slot." Another agent, frustrated. "They're asking if we have a judicial warrant. How the hell do they even know the difference?" Now, that is an interesting question. Homan rubbed his temples as he scanned through the agent reports. Line after line of lawful procedure, shut down. Not by chaos. Not by panic. But by rehearsed, scripted responses. One building had a literal checklist taped to the door. One agent reported that a child, stood defiantly at the doorway, gripping a flyer like it was a lightsaber, shouting, "You can't come in unless there's a judge's signature." It would have been funny if it weren't so damn calculated. This wasn't just defiance. Homan exhaled, shaking his head. This was choreography. Then he turned the page. A man in his early 30s, undocumented, suspected of involvement in an assault case out of Nevada, had briefly been taken into custody during the operation. Every step followed by the book. But when they got to the station, a technicality. A gap between judicial and administrative warrants. And no surprise, a swarm of local lawyers was already outside, phones in hand, cameras rolling. Within hours, the suspect was released. And watching the entire thing unfold, his daughter, 7 years old, standing on the porch, tears in her eyes, clutching her laminated flyer like it was the Magna Carta, telling federal agents, "You're not allowed. This paper says so." The agent's report was short, bitter. "We followed the book, but the book's being rewritten by people who've never worn a badge." That was the moment everything changed. This was no longer just about law. This was about narrative warfare, a battle over perception. The agents had the authority, but the communities? They had the script. Someone had told them what to say, what to post, what to demand, but more importantly, what to fear. Because, make no mistake, fear is a powerful weapon. And when it's packaged as empowerment, when the same voices screaming, "ICE is fascist," are also teaching you how to say, "I plead the fifth at your front door," you're not in a debate anymore. You're in a battlefield. Holman turned to his deputy. His voice was calm, but his meaning was razor-sharp. "This isn't community outreach." He closed the file. "This is obstruction sold as civil rights. And someone's cashing in." And Holman had a theory. The flyers. The synchronized silence. The sudden explosion of Know Your Rights training. It all pointed back to a single source. Not someone in the shadows. Not some anonymous activist. No. A woman. A woman who didn't wear a badge, but sure as hell acted like she wrote the rulebook. And her name was already underlined on his desk. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The deeper he read, the more the dots connected. Not in pencil, but in permanent ink. So he made the call. One last step before facing the lioness herself. "Pull the town hall footage," he ordered his legal analyst. "Every second of it. I want timestamps. I want transcripts. I want tone of voice. If she's telling people how to shut us out." He exhaled, jaw clenched. "Then it's about damn time we knock on her door instead." An investigator worth his salt doesn't chase ghosts, he chases evidence. And Tom Holman? He was about to get some. "Pull up the damn live stream." His voice was steady, eyes locked on the memo as if it had personally insulted him. Seconds passed, the kind that stretched too long when you already know what's coming. Then, the screen of a government-issued monitor flickered to life. There she was. America's favorite leftist screensaver. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, lit like a podcast messiah, carefully positioned in front of a bookshelf stacked with fake ferns and books that may have been props more than literature. And she was speaking, not in fiery outrage, not in chaotic protest, but with that signature tone of hers. The kind that doesn't shout but still cuts like a blade wrapped in velvet. The slower they operate, the less they can break. Tom didn't blink. He didn't exhale. He let the words settle, heavy in the stale, fluorescent-lit air of his office. "Did she just," one analyst murmured, leaning forward, his jaw slightly open. "Did she just teach people how to stall a federal agency like it's a Girl Scout life hack?" Tom's response was low, steady, razor-sharp. No, a pause, then colder. "She weaponized hesitancy. And she wasn't done. The blueprint for obstruction. She laid it out, clear as day. Don't open the door. Demand a judicial warrant. Not an administrative one. Stay silent. Ask for a lawyer, even if you don't need one. And the cherry on top? You don't have to tell them where you were born." Was it legal? Technically. Was it malicious? Without question. This wasn't some community outreach initiative. This was a tactical seminar on how to paralyze federal enforcement with a Wi-Fi connection and some righteous indignation. Tom pushed himself out of his chair, pacing the room like a man looking for something he already knew had been stolen. He muttered under his breath, "Title 8, U.S. Code, Section 1324. His fingers tapped against the desk. Let's see if her empathy holds up against federal statute. Then, there it was. Not buried in political grandstanding, not lost in legal gray areas, just black and white law. Any person who encourages or induces an alien to reside in the United States, knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that such residence is or will be in violation of law. It was like staring into a mirror. Encouragement. Inducement. Reckless disregard. Tom didn't need to interpret the law. He just needed to underline it. This isn't outreach, he said, voice calm but sharp as a blade. It's obstruction, dressed up in Instagram-friendly fonts and activist hashtags. Radicalizing legality with a wink and a Wi-Fi password. His team remained frozen, their eyes still glued to the screen, where AOC continued, unbothered, undeterred, untouched by consequence. She doesn't say it outright, Tom went on. She doesn't need to. That's the genius of it. That's how you radicalize legality. Not by breaking the law, but by drawing new lines with a wink and a Wi-Fi password. A staffer finally spoke, voice quiet. So, what now? Tom exhaled slowly, the kind of breath you take when you realize you're holding the lightning rod in a storm that's already here. Now. His voice was calm, unshaken, determined. Now, we put her under oath. The room was silent. Let's see if all that confidence holds up without an internet connection. The machine kicks into motion. Tom didn't wait for applause. He didn't need dramatic pauses. He just moved. The committee brief was drafted, signed, and sent. The gears of Capitol Hill began turning. And across the city, miles away from the polished halls of Washington, the first ripple was about to hit. AOC's moment of reckoning. Mid-sentence. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood on stage at a community forum, draped in flowing sleeves, voice ablaze, her signature righteous glint practically pre-installed in her pupils. This wasn't a speech. This was a declaration. And the crowd? They weren't just listening, they were leaning in. We don't back down when they threaten us, she declared. We don't go silent when they try to criminalize truth. The envelope arrived in the hands of a frantic aide. A hurried whisper. A barely concealed urgency. AOC glanced down at the paper. One look. No double take. Her fingers tightened just slightly around the edges. And then, a smile. Not smug. Not shaken. Something else entirely. She turned back to the mic, her voice as sharp as ever, a scalpel dipped in sugar. Well, seems I've been invited to explain myself before a panel of very important men. A chuckle rippled through the audience. Nervous at first. Then louder. Bolder. She leaned in. Let me be clear. The room went still. I don't fear political theater. I don't flinch when subpoenas come dressed as strategy. And I sure as hell don't apologize for teaching my constituents how to stand up for themselves in the face of intimidation disguised as policy. The energy shifted. If they want to put me on trial for that, she added, that smile still growing, then they'd better be ready to be cross-examined themselves. And just like that, a summons became a slingshot. The crowd erupted. Cameras rolled. And somewhere in a Manhattan editing bay, a team of interns was already slicing the clip for Twitter, TikTok, and whatever new platform Gen Z had adopted overnight. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the headlines were already in place. AOC subpoenaed, claps back in fire speech. Power versus principle. The House gets a reckoning. The game was set. The players had taken their positions. And the next move? That belonged to the storm.